In post-war Japan, as the nation still lay in ruins, the air thick with the bitter taste of defeat and the fragile hope for a brighter tomorrow, an event unfolded that continues to cast a shadow over Japanese justice. The story concerns a tragic incident known as the Teigin Incident, a mass poisoning that occurred at the Teikoku Bank branch in January of 1948. This case, riddled with mysteries and contradictions, left not only 12 deaths, but also profound doubts about the fairness of the verdict. Tokyo, January of 1948. The city was slowly yet surely recovering from the war's aftermath. The ruins left by the bombings were a grim reminder of the nightmare experienced, a tragedy that had shaken the country. People struggled for survival, suffering from hunger and treacherous diseases. Despair permeated the air, yet even in this abysmal darkness, hope flickered. In such conditions, the Teikoku Bank branch, located in the Kanda district, seemed a quiet oasis of stability, tranquility, and the anticipation of a better life. It was a branch of one of Japan's largest banks, a place where people could keep their meager savings, save for the future, and make plans, despite the surrounding chaos. But on one fateful day, this quiet corner transformed into an arena of pure horror. On January 26, 1948, at approximately 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a man entered the bank. He wore a doctor's uniform and carried a bag very similar to those used by medical professionals. The man introduced himself as a specialist in combating the dysentery epidemic that was raging across post-war Japan. He explained he was there to administer vaccinations to the employees in an attempt to prevent the spread of this terrible disease. No one could have imagined the death lurking behind that facade. He requested that everyone gather together. 16 individuals, completely unaware of any deception, obediently followed his instruction. The man produced a syringe and, according to his words, injected medication. After finishing, he quickly left the bank, leaving the employees in complete bewilderment. It seemed that everything would be all right, but within a few minutes, the people began to feel unbearable pain. They fell, gripped by death throes, their bodies contorted in agony. The poison, coursing through their veins, spread rapidly, bringing death in its wake. In a matter of mere hours, 12 individuals had departed this world forever. The remaining survivors, fighting with their last reserves of strength, were rushed to the hospital, their condition deemed critical. This terrifying incident, like a clap of thunder, instantly shook the public. The nation, already weary from a series of hardships, was plunged into an abyss of grief and confusion in an instant. What could have driven someone to commit such a monstrous act? What was the motive behind this inhumane massacre? These questions, like thorny barbs, pierced the minds of investigators and ordinary citizens alike, offering no respite, neither day nor night. The initial investigation, hastily launched, presented a chaotic and poorly organized spectacle. Confronted with a case unlike any other, the police desperately grasped for any lead they could find. A small bag was discovered in the bank vault. Inside, there was a syringe, a pair of rubber gloves, and a glass. Analysis of the syringe's contents confirmed the presence of potassium cyanide, a deadly poison. The bitterness of fear spread across the country like a poisonous fog. The police immediately began searching for the person who had presented themselves as a doctor. Witnesses were interviewed, and composite sketches were created. The atmosphere in the country was building, much like it does before a thunderstorm. Anxiety and panic gripped people's minds. Newspapers were filled with horrifying headlines, fueling public interest and increasing pressure on the investigation. One of the initial suspects was Eitaro Ishikawa, a former bank employee dismissed just weeks before the tragedy. Investigators considered revenge as a potential motive. However, Ishikawa's alibi was irrefutable. Moreover, the ensuing investigation revealed he was merely a small pawn in this game, possessing neither sufficient knowledge nor access to the lethal substance required for the poisoning. The investigation, like a ship lost in thick fog, stalled. Evidence was minuscule. The few witnesses contradicted their testimonies, and public pressure, like an escalating storm, intensified with each passing day. It seemed the perpetrator, as slippery as an eel, would escape deserved retribution, remaining unpunished. But fate, that treacherous mocker, decided otherwise. Soon, the figure of the artist Hirasawa Sadamichi entered the investigator's view. Hirasawa, a frail and emaciated man, lived a miserable existence in poverty. His paintings, like unloved children, failed to resonate with the public, and money was desperately scarce. The artist was burdened by numerous debts, and he was also passionately fond of gambling, turning his life into a series of ups and downs where the stake was everything. At first glance, he seemed completely unrelated to the bank, and even more so to the horrifying mass poisoning. But fate had tragically connected him to the case. The police arrested Hirasawa, suspecting his involvement in the crime, based on a series of circumstantial evidence. Firstly, his appearance matched the description of a man who had presented himself as a doctor. Secondly, his financial situation left much to be desired, and the investigators suggested that it was his need that might have driven him to commit the crime. Thirdly, a small sum of money, presumably stolen from the ill-fated bank, was discovered in his modest apartment. Hirasawa categorically denied his guilt, claiming that he had nothing to do with what had happened. His voice trembled, and his eyes betrayed confusion and fear. But the police seemed relentless, ignoring his pleas and protests. He was interrogated for many days, subjected to various pressure tactics, even physical violence. Broken, he ultimately signed a confession. The trial of Hirasawa began in 1949. The prosecution built its case on circumstantial evidence and the defendant's own testimony, given, as he later claimed, under torture. The defense, in turn, attempted to prove his innocence, pointing out numerous inconsistencies in the case and the complete absence of direct evidence. During the trial, new and shocking details surfaced. It was revealed that Hirasawa had indeed been in the vicinity of the bank on that fateful day, but his explanations seemed utterly unconvincing. He only briefly mentioned that he had simply been passing by, but he could not clearly explain what he had been doing there. Public opinion divided into two irreconcilable camps. Some vehemently believed in Hirasawa's guilt, while others harbored doubts, sensing a falsehood at the heart of the case. The media covered the trial extensively, fueling public interest and escalating the tension to its breaking point. Many people were convinced the police were blatantly rushing to a verdict, eager to close the case at any cost, without regard for the truth. Ultimately, despite the absence of irrefutable direct evidence and numerous contradictions in the testimonies, Hirasawa was found guilty. The court handed down a severe sentence, the death penalty. This verdict was a genuine shock to an enormous number of people. A series of appeals followed, but all were dismissed one after another. It seemed that justice had finally been served, that a full stop had been placed. Yet, like rust, doubt continued to gnaw at the minds of many. Over the course of many years, the case accumulated new, sometimes completely unbelievable details and versions of what had happened. Numerous respected experts and independent researchers, after thoroughly examining the case materials, voiced their doubts about Hirasawa's guilt. As new investigations and analyses of the evidence unfolded, new facts emerged, irrefutably indicating that the police had intentionally distorted evidence, falsified witness statements, and manipulated proof. One of the most serious problems in this case was the complete absence of a motive. Hirasawa, who had no direct connection to the bank, seemed entirely uninvolved. No evidence suggested that he sought to profit from this crime was presented. Witness testimonies raised no fewer questions. Many of them seemed contradictory and inconsistent, as if they would crumble under the slightest pressure. The police appeared biased in their approach, stubbornly trying to prove Hirasawa's guilt at any cost. In 1955, Hirasawa made yet another attempt to change the course of events, once again declaring his innocence. He claimed that the confession had been extracted under unbearable torture, but it was already too late. The court seemed deaf to his new claims. For many long years, Hirasawa continued to fight desperately for his life, but his chances dwindled. He appealed, reached out to the public, wrote heartfelt letters, but all his efforts shattered against a wall of indifference. For more than 40 years, an eternity it seemed, he remained in prison, awaiting execution. Hirasawa became a living symbol of the blatant injustice within the Japanese judicial system, a target pointed to as proof of its imperfections. Yet the public didn't forget his case. Many people across the country supported him, sincerely believing he was a victim of a monstrous judicial error. Organizations emerged, dedicating themselves to Hirasawa's defense, tirelessly demanding a review of his case. In 1987, when Hirasawa was already 95 years old, his case was finally re-examined. But fate, it seemed, remained relentless. In 1990, he died in prison, never seeing justice. His death was a heavy blow to everyone who believed in his innocence, who hoped the truth would prevail. Alas, Hirasawa's death didn't end the heated discussions surrounding the tragic Teigin Incident. Many people continue to study the case files to this day, trying to find new evidence of his innocence. There are various theories about who the real culprit could have been, each shrouded in mystery. One of the most common theories, stirring the minds of researchers, suggests the involvement of the American occupation forces. In post-war Japan, for many years, the Americans controlled almost every aspect of life, including, of course, the banking system. Some researchers insist that the poisoning could have been directly related to the theft of large sums of money or pursued other, far larger, political motives. Another version whispers of the involvement of members of organized crime, the Yakuza. In those turbulent times, the Yakuza waged a real war for influence and total control over all kinds of business spheres. And the poisoning, according to this version, was merely another element in their cunning and treacherous operations. Yet another version, perhaps the most terrifying, suggests that a group of scientists dedicated to developing weapons of mass destruction was behind the crime. In post-war Japan, many scientists eagerly collaborated with the American military, actively participating in research and development. The poisoning could very well have been a part of their secret activities. Which of these theories is correct remains a mystery to this day. The Teigin Incident continues to be one of the most enigmatic crimes in Japanese history, plunging into a morass of dark secrets. The case is full of inconsistencies and contradictions, making its investigation incredibly complex and convoluted. The psychological portrait of Sadamichi Hirasawa, like that of anyone in such a situation, was a complex mosaic of fears, despair, and a flickering hope. Initially, he was broken by the relentless pressure of the investigation. His psyche was undermined, and he confessed to a crime he may never have committed. The realization that his life was hanging by a thread forced him to grasp at any, even the faintest, chance. Within him, the primal fear of death battled against a fragile hope for release. He changed his testimony repeatedly, as if desperately trying to find a single way to save himself. But all his efforts proved futile. He spent long decades in captivity, awaiting his death sentence. Each new day became an unbearable torment. He lost his freedom, but even more frightening was the loss of justice. This case vividly demonstrated that even in the most developed countries, the judicial system was capable of making monstrous mistakes. The influence of public opinion, the political climate, and most terrifyingly, the errors of the investigation could lead to an innocent person being imprisoned. The Teigin Incident became a tragic reminder of how easily the truth could be buried under the weight of prejudice, falsification, and political intrigue. He demonstrated how easily a person could be broken under the relentless pressure of the system, and how incredibly difficult it was to achieve justice. This case left an indelible mark on Japanese society. It sparked widespread discussions about the very concept of justice, the role of the media, and the responsibility of the state to its citizens. Many people today began to view the work of law enforcement and the judicial system with a greater degree of criticism. The Teigin Incident, which occurred many years ago, left behind a series of unresolved questions, like dark shadows frozen in the past. What really happened within the walls of the Teikoku Bank branch? Who was the real criminal, and who was an innocent victim? And why was an innocent man sentenced to death, taking the truth with him to the grave? The impact of this tragic event on Japanese culture proved to be colossal. Echoes of those terrible days found their reflection in literature, cinema, and theatrical productions. Stories of the Teigin Incident continue to be retold, passed down from mouth to mouth, generation to generation, reminding us of the importance of justice and how easily it can be trampled. This case became a harsh lesson for us all. It teaches us to always question, to carefully analyze any information, whether it's a small newspaper note or a witness's testimony, and to fight for the truth, even when it seems impossible, even when only impenetrable darkness lies ahead. We are obliged to remember the victims of this monstrous crime and to honor the memory of those who bravely fought for justice. The Teigin Incident isn't just dry lines of the chronicle about a mass poisoning. It is a piercing story of human tragedy, of blatant injustice, and of a courageous struggle for the truth. It is a harsh reminder of the need to be vigilant, of the unacceptability of allowing the system to suppress the defenseless. This is a story about how, even after many decades following the tragedy, we must tirelessly seek answers and unwaveringly strive for justice. Looking into the past, we see in the Teigin Incident a mirror reflecting the darkest sides of human nature, and we understand how difficult it can be to achieve justice. This case makes us think about many things, about the price of truth, about how fragile life is, and about a multitude of other soul-tormenting questions. And perhaps the most agonizing question that lingers after this tragedy is, was Hirasawa innocent? And if so, who is the true killer? These are questions that may never be answered, yet they will continue to haunt us, reminding us of the world's cruelty and the imperative to fight for the triumph of justice.